Okay, let's talk about the Hellenistic Age. The Hellenistic Age is the age from Alexander the Great through the Roman conquest of Egypt. So notice I'm mentioning the Roman world already. Roman civilization in the West that begins in Italy. That's where Rome is, of course. That's important is because this Hellenistic age is an age defined by culture to a large degree. What we're going to look at is some of the cultural patterns that emerge in this world conquered by Alexander that will later be introduced into Roman civilization and become part of the culture of the Roman world. So let's look at the Hellenistic age. Let's think about what this is. Just a bit of background. Basically, what's going on, and we talked about this when we talked about the Greeks, is that the Greeks fought each other after the Peloponnesian War. One Greek city-state after another tried to run and manage the affairs of all of Greece. It didn't really work. Some of the warfare continued that left them weak and left them open to conquest, which is what happened in 338 at the Battle of Chaeronea when Philip of Macedonia invaded and conquered the Greek world and then planned to invade Persia. So that sort of sets the stage for the end of ancient Greek civilization and the beginning of the Hellenistic age. And when we look at Hellenistic, we can look at a couple of terms. The word Hellas, that's what the Greeks call their country, Greece. The word Hellenic means pure Greek culture. It's the culture of Greece. And so you can see the word Hellenistic is related to those two words. And I have modified Greek culture, adapted Greek culture. Basically, what the word Hellenistic means, it means Greek-like culture. And that it is referring to the culture that emerges in the Eastern world, in the Asian world, when Western civilization, the Greeks, move in and conquer and become kind of dominant, particularly in the urban areas, and new cultural forms emerge and blend. You see the Greek and Asian cultural patterns blend. We might call that cultural appropriation today, but that's not something the ancients thought about or even bothered by. That's sort of how cultures developed. When cultures mix, the new cultural patterns and forms emerge. And so Hellenistic refers to a blend of Greek and Asian culture. And let's look at what happened. Basically, some political and military history. Alexander is Philip's son. Philip is going to be assassinated in 336. He had planned to conquer the Persian Empire, and Alexander continues with this plan. And it's actually Alexander who is going to invade the Persian Empire in 334 with his Greek and Macedonian military, along with a host of other people from Greece and Macedonia, educated people, the poets, the philosophers, the scientists, who are going to study the world that they conquer and record his conquest and also praise him for how wonderful of a leader and a commander he is. So they bring military personnel and a number of these sort of cultural figures that are important in ancient Greece. And one by one, parts of the Persian Empire fall to Alexander. He is an amazing, amazing political leader. He goes from Egypt, conquers Egypt, cities along the Mediterranean. He sets himself up as Pharaoh, a god king in Egypt. That's something he wasn't in the Greek world. Now a god king, and which king doesn't want to be a god? He then goes on to Persia, a big battle of Gaugamela where he defeats the Persians. He continues into Persia, destroys that empire, conquers it, moves all the way to Afghanistan and India. And one of the things that happens is his troops sort of mutiny. They've gone too far. They decide to mutiny and it's time to turn back. And Alexander himself is going to turn back and he dies in Babylon at a very, very young age. But during this time period, this brief time period of his life, he establishes a number of new cities. Alexandria in Egypt is the biggest and most important city. That's where the Ptolemies are. Number of new cities, and he encourages his troops, his men, and particularly his leaders, to marry into local families, the elites of local families. So you begin seeing that sort of blending of East and West that occurs in this. And there are different interpretations of Alexander. What was he, just a megalomaniac military leader, or did he have other ideas in mind? You can read into some of that a little later. I won't get into that now, but you can see this is the largest empire to date. It was the Persian Empire, but he conquered the Persian Empire. So you can see it stretches from Greece over here in Egypt all the way into parts of, this would be Afghanistan and India down here. Here's the Indus River for India. And you can see this Persian Empire, which had great roads. Now, Alexander is very destructive in some places, but he establishes all kinds of cities where the Greeks are going to filter in. Now, as I mentioned, Alexander did not live a long life. He died young, and he didn't have an heir. So what happens is his generals fight among each other to see who is going to control Alexander's empire. And what they essentially do is take control over parts of it. None of them is powerful enough to control the entire empire. So you see the Ptolemaic dynasty emerge in Egypt. They set themselves up as pharaohs. You see the Seleucid kingdom, the Antigonids in Greece. Seleucids are in Asia. And you can see here's some of the remnants of these empires, the Ptolemies over here. I've got a couple of maps. Pay attention to what's going on over here. While the Hellenistic Age is underway, this city, Rome, has been conquering Italy already. So this civilization is emerging, Roman civilization in the West, simultaneously with Alexander's conquests of the Persian Empire and the creation of this Hellenistic world. So we'll get to that in a little later. But as you can see, these are some of the kingdoms. The one in Egypt is the most interesting one. The Ptolemies basically adopt a lot of Egyptian culture because it's good to be a pharaoh, it's good to be a god king, but they do promote a lot of learning. And when you see Alexandria, that city obviously named after Alexander, you see a marvelous city that has the world's largest library at that time and has a number of scholars who participate in a variety of endeavors from astronomy to geography to medicine. I mean, they're vivisecting patients to learn how the body works. Vivisection, by the way, is operating on someone while they are very much alive, not while they are dead. That would be dissection. So they make incredible contributions to learning in the ancient world, this civilization, the Ptolemies in Egypt. And there's just another map of some of the kingdoms, by the way. Now, one of the interesting things about this Hellenistic world is the dominance of the Greeks. The Greeks are the privileged class. They have favored status. In fact, more and more Greeks are encouraged to immigrate to the Hellenistic world, to leave Greece, immigrate to the Hellenistic world. And what they find are a bunch of cities that have Greek temples to Greek gods and goddesses, and that they have a special status, a favored position. They are the elites within these Hellenistic cities. They are the people who man the bureaucracy and other important institutions of government at that time. So the Greek culture is the dominant culture, and it dominates a lot of these cultures that are very, very ancient, that came before Greece, that developed before Greece. And a lot of the locals aren't particularly happy about Greek dominance. We have a new language that emerges. It's a Greek language, it's a dialect of Greek, which is kind of a business language, a universal language, so that people throughout the Hellenistic world can communicate. And that is Koine. The New Testament, by the way, parts of the New Testament were written in Koine. So we're getting to Christianity a little later on from here. So Greeks have special status, favored status. But what happens that's important about this Hellenistic age are the new cultural innovations that emerge. When you look at Greek mythology or Greek religion, they thought of it as religion, not a mythology. It doesn't really satisfy a lot of people. You know, the Greek gods aren't personal gods. There's no savior around. And you have these other religions that offer that sort of possibility of an afterlife in the ancient world when you think about Egyptian religion or you think about Zoroastrianism. And one of the things that happens is you have a lot of temples to Greek gods and goddesses that people just observe out of a sense of patriotism or civic duty, sort of like putting the flag out on Memorial Day or something. And so they didn't really care for the Greek religion at all. And what emerges at this time are new religions that recognize sort of one God as a God of a particular group of people. And some of these gods come from other religions. So what you're looking at is the development of new forms of monotheism or monotheistic-like religions that emerge using various gods and goddesses from religions around the Hellenistic world. Dionysus, there's a cult or a religion of Dionysus. There's one of Zeus, that is, Zeus takes on the ability to promise life after death. So he changes from the Greek version of Zeus to a Hellenistic version of Zeus, a monotheistic Zeus. Osiris has already offered salvation to believers. Isis is particularly popular with women. It's very widespread. The goddess Isis that comes from Egypt. Serapis is a new god where you just stick a couple of gods together and create a new god. But one of the things about these religions, they're called mystery religions. They're very popular with ordinary people who aren't actually interested in Greek religion. They're very emotional, like a lot of religions. They're very emotional. They involve a lot of rituals, like you are baptized into this religion. You know, one of the reasons it's called a mystery religion is that people don't know all the ideas and beliefs of the religion until they are baptized and initiated into it. These religions are very ritualistic. You know, a lot of religions, people like the rituals that involved in a number of religions. So you have baptism as a religion, you have sacrificial meals, you have things like confession of sins. Those sorts of rituals are very, very important. And they are monotheistic religions that promise life after death, as I said. That's what makes them very important. One of the interesting mystery religions that comes out of this it involves the god Mithras or Mithra. It's spelled differently, Mithra, Mithras. You can spell it either way you want. It's kind of interesting because I think it was about 15 years ago when I was in London. I was taking a tour. I was walking around the city of London, and it was a business district. And I came across some area that was just looked like a mess. It had rocks and stones there. And I asked the person I was with what that was and what's it doing in this business district. And she told me, well, that's a shrine to Mithra in the heart of London, and it was exposed. It was uncovered after during the Blitz in World War II when the Germans were bombing London. So they just preserved it. So it's a very widespread religion. It comes from Zoroastrianism, so it's dominant within the Persian realm among Persian people, but it spreads far and wide. It got to London because Mithra is the god for Roman soldiers. It's kind of interesting. Mithra is a god like some of these other gods who supposedly lived a human life, performed great deeds and miracles, and died and rose from the dead. So he has that idea that since he is a god or a goddess, in the case of Isis, who has lived a human life and died and rose from the dead, that god or goddess has the ability to make individuals rise from the dead or have their souls enter heaven. So Mithras, being a male god, he's associated with the sun. The most important day of the week to honor Mithras is Sunday. And associated with the sun, he's associated with the birth of the sun, that is the winter solstice, or shortest day that leads into the longest day later on. He was honored typically around December 21st, sometime around that time. Later, Mithras is going to be honored on December 25th. Just depends on what calendar you were using. So you can see some similarities there with Mithras. Now, there are scholars who say it's actually Christianity that influences this sort of religion of Mithra. But you do see some parallels there with mystery religions and the religion that's ultimately going to conquer Western Europe, that is Christianity. Philosophy becomes important, and it becomes less abstract and more personal. These are philosophies basically that emerge that aren't like the sort of issues that are about reality and truth and the immaterial world discussed by Plato and Aristotle, all that stuff. These are sort of simple ways of living, philosophies, kind of self-help ideas, philosophies. You see two of the biggest being Stoicism and later Epicureanism and a number of others. Basically, what these philosophies are focused on is teaching people how to be happy and how to enjoy life, because it is a brutal, short life. It is a difficult world to live in. So what's the best way for people to gain happiness? You know, and they all focus on this concept of pleasure. What's the best way to gain pleasure? And by pleasure, they don't mean physical pleasure where you eat a buffet or you do some other stuff that you might want to ask your advisor about. They mean a state of mind, an emotional peace. You're free of pain. You're free of stress. You're free of anything that causes you trouble. That's what they mean. That's what pleasure is. So you have to do things that rid yourself of this anxiety and stress of the world around you. Stoicism is a very important one at that time. The Stoics, Zeno the Stoic founded it. And what Zeno says is basically there's an order to this universe, and we need to submit to this universe, understand that we're not always in control of our own destiny. Just submit to this order. And once you accept your role in this universal order, you'll be at peace and peace of mind. That's the goal. Not driving a BMW or anything or gathering a bunch of material items. It's peace of mind. What makes you happy? How do you become free of stress? Well, leading a virtuous life is one way to achieve this, because according to the Stoics, we have a brotherhood, or a sisterhood, by the way, of mankind. They promote this unity of mankind idea. Regardless of who you are, what your ethnicity is, we're all one and the same. It's sort of a universal humanity. And we need to lead a virtuous life in which we help others, we care for the poor, assist the less fortunate, those sorts of things. Those are virtues all people should follow. And when you lead a virtuous life, you are called on to participate in government, because virtuous people are going to make governments better. That is according to the Stoics. Another one I have, and I didn't mention this at this time, and it should be the first one up here. I somehow neglected to put that on the PowerPoint, are the Epicureans. Epicureans are the ones who seek pleasure the most. They are the ones where Epicurean means pleasure or pleasurable. Epicurus, who founded it, said pleasure is the highest good. Pleasure, lead a pleasurable life. And what Epicurus means by pleasure is not being a glutton, not getting drunk, not smoking weed or any of that other stuff. What you do is achieve a state of mental peace, avoiding all kinds of things that avoid distress. That's what's important to the Epicureans. Remember, I don't have the word there, Epicureanism, but add that to this philosophy. It should be the very first philosophy we're talking about. Now, another thing that happens, and I mentioned this, we do see some advances in science, in the sciences. Ptolemy, an astronomer. There's Aristarchus, another astronomer. Aristarchus looks at the world and says, the world consists of a sun-centered universe and the planets revolve around the sun. Ptolemy comes to the opposite conclusion, and that's the one that survives, that the Earth, Ptolemy believes the Earth is the center of the universe rather than the sun. And that's going to be the one that survives until Galileo and Copernicus and all of those guys come along and change that conception of our solar system. Great textbook that's been used until the modern age called The Elements of Geometry by Euclid. And so you begin to see a lot of different things occurring, particularly in the sciences, in the arts. The sculpture is kind of interesting at that time, in philosophies that emerge, in religions that emerge, that are going to be influential to the Roman world.